All right, class, so today we're going to be talking about regions. The title of the lecture today is Why Regions Are So Hard to Define. We're going to be going over the three different types of regions and comparing and contrasting them. All right, so we're going to do just a quick activity. I want you to draw a mental map of the U.S. in your notes. That's just a map that you create in your mind, so just draw it as best you can. You might not be an artist. That is okay. In one color, I want you to draw a line around what you think would be the South, and then you can go ahead and label that. So what would you consider here in the United States as the South? Next, think, where is the Midwest? Go ahead and draw a line around that and write Midwest, or MW if you want to shorten it. And yet another color, draw a line around the Northeast. And again, if you want to abbreviate that to NE, that would be fine. And then last, what about the Southwest? Now this will come into play a little bit later in the lecture, okay? So you might want to pause the video to quickly do that, and then start it back up when you are ready. All right, so here's our map of the United States. Hopefully you went ahead and labeled where you think the South, the Midwest, the Northeast, and the Southwest are. All right, so regions are about scale. So we talked about scale in class last week. So we'll be looking at global, national, and local. And they're also defined by physical and human characteristics. Okay, those place characteristics that we had discussed earlier also define regions. So we'll have physical and human characteristics that we'll be looking for. All right, so first we have global scale. Again, here are the major regions of the world. We have North America, Central America, South America, Africa. Pretty much all of the continents as well would be considered regions. Next, we have the national scale. So here, the United States has 50 states, each one a particular region. And then we even get down to the state and county scale. So here, Arkansas would be considered a region, and then the counties within Arkansas would also be considered regions. And we're going to decide which type of regions these are here in just a moment out of the big three. Moving down even to a smaller scale here, we have wards, precincts, and census tracts. So wards would be your voting areas, which are much, much smaller than the county as a whole, and of course much, 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 much smaller than the state or the country. Here's the voting wards in Russellville, Arkansas. So again, a pretty small city to begin with, and there are 4 voting wards just within that. Each one of these wards would be defined as a region. All right, so what is a region? A region is an area with one or more traits, characteristics, features that are common and make it different from surrounding areas. So make sure you get that definition down. Again, the key here, we're looking for one or more traits, characteristics, or features that make it common, that differentiate it from other areas around it. All right, so let's go ahead and let's see how you did on your map. So here we have the South, the Northeast, the Midwest, and the West. Now, this is considered a more formal region. Yours might have varied. It might have varied, and if it did, that's okay. We'll explain why that is, why that can happen here in just a moment. All right, this is a registry for the interpreters of the deaf. They also have regions. You can see they have 5 regions throughout the United States. And again, those are specific by borders. So they have borders that separate them. The Southeastern Conference also has borders that generally separate that area. But here we're talking about the western side of the conference and the eastern side, okay? The Fed has regions, okay? So here, if we're looking at the Fed, they have 12 different regions throughout the United States. This is the Federal Reserve, which pretty much takes care of the money within the country. So again, there are specific regions that the Fed covers, and they are defined by true borders. Here in here in Texas, you can see we have physical regions. So we have plains, we have the Big Bend area, the South Texas Plains, the Gulf Coast region, which of course we're part of and Houston is part of, Piney Woods, which would be an area with quite a bit of forest cover. So again, these are specific physical regions with borders that are measurable. All right, Arkansas has natural regions. You can see we have the Ozark Mountains right here. We have the valley in Arkansas. Here are some more mountains and then a coastal plain. So there are specific borders here that we can measure. And mountains are obviously different than valleys. And it's different than an alluvial plain. So again, these are specific, definable regions. Now, not all regions are easily defined by borders. So looking here, we have the Deep South. Well, what is the Deep South? So here, this says the American nations today. Nations are just simply areas that share a particular culture. So we think of maybe the Cherokee Nation for Native Americans. They share a particular culture, even though they don't have a state that they live in or that they can call their own. So here, again, we have these areas that share a particular culture. So we have, again, the Deep South, Greater Appalachia. If you're familiar with New Orleans and the culture down there, they call that New France. Now, these borders sometimes can shift. Okay, so based on your own perceptions, this can shift. They don't have like true borders, like you're crossing into the border of the Deep South from Greater Appalachia. It doesn't happen. You don't know when it happens. It kind of depends on your own thought process there, and we'll get into what type of region that would be. Next, transition zones. So transition zones and regions, oftentimes these boundaries, they are not set in stone. Now, sometimes they are. You cross the border from Texas into Oklahoma, you know where that is. But when are you crossing over from the South into the Midwest? When are you crossing over from the Northeast into the Midwest? Is Texas, are we Southern or not? How Southern are we? Some people consider us Southwest. So again, we have to, when we analyze these regions, we have to take all the evidence into consideration and make a determination. So again, sometimes these regions, and they do change. So again, South Sudan is a new country. It's a region that did not exist before that did. I like this example, sweet tea. So look, areas around the South, we love our sweet tea. So when does that region end? When do we stop seeing sweet tea, or when is it no longer Southern? And what about football? In the South, we like a lot of football. But do they like football in the North? Yes. So, again, when does that region end? Does it end in Canada? Those are some of the questions that we'll be looking at today. All right, so there are 3 types of regions. So in your Cornell notes on the left-hand side, you might want to go ahead and put what are the 3 types of regions. First type of region we're going to be talking about today is called a formal region, also known as a uniform region. So guys, I know this looks like a lot, but you need to go ahead and make sure that you get all of this in your notes. And if it is highlighted, that means that it is important. So it is characterized by a common characteristic, generally something that is measurable. Okay, so I can sit here and say that within Houston, we have 2 million Spanish speakers. That is something that I can measure. So these are people who share a particular language, religion, nationality, culture, some common physical property, and that could be vegetation, landforms, or climate. The main idea here is that it is measurable and pretty easily measurable. Okay, it's easily defined. We've got common political identities, and these are generally laid out by borders of counties, states, countries. We've got formal regions that include climate regions, which again are pretty well defined. You've got landform regions. We have the Piedmont, which is a plateau in Pennsylvania. We also have, of course, the biggest example here would probably be the Rocky Mountains. We have economic regions. Well, in Kansas, they build a lot, or they grow a lot of wheat. That would be the wheat belt. We're going to look at an area that grows a bunch of corn here and explain why that would be a formal region. Now, this is the key. Formal regions can be defined by measures. Measures of population, income, ethnicity, crop production, population density. These are things that we can measure. That is the key. So make sure you circle measure, make sure you highlight it, because that will determine whether it is a true formal region or one of the other two. All right, Germany is a formal region. So think about it in your head. Why would this be considered formal? Well, hopefully you said because, hey, look, we've got borders here. I can tell when I cross from Germany into France or from Germany into Belgium because it says, hey, welcome to Belgium. Welcome to France. You are now leaving Germany. So this becomes a measurable space. Okay? Corn production. So this is based on counties. So in each county, they report how much corn production they've made. So if we're looking here, again, each one of these is measurable. I can see that over here in the Houston area, we produced about 5 million, almost to 10 million bushels of corn in the area. That is something that was measured. There is a number that backs that up. All right, here's the Piedmont region. This whole area is covered by a huge plateau. Again, measurable. There are borders that we can see where the plateau begins and where it ends. Number 2, functional regions. So make sure you write a number 2. Organized around a node. Make sure you get this term, or a focal point. Okay, so it's pretty much the center of the region itself. So it pretty much acts as the hub. Okay, so it's linked to that node by transportation systems, communication systems, or other economic associations. So generally these are for functional regions. A lot of times they have to do with humans, how we communicate with each other and how we move around. So a typical functional region is the metropolitan area as defined by the Bureau of Census. A metropolitan area is simply the city and its surrounding suburbs that pretty much use the city for jobs. So think about Spring, Texas. We are a suburb of Houston, so we are in the Houston metropolitan area. A lot of your parents probably work in Houston, maybe in downtown Houston, and so therefore they commute. Houston, downtown Houston, would be the functional region, and of course the freeway system would also be a functional area that your parents use to get them into the city for their job. So the New York MSA, this is the Metropolitan Statistical Area. It's a functional region. Why? Well, because it involves Connecticut. It involves some cities in New Jersey. So it's about 19 million people. And they are linked by commuting patterns, trade flows, television and radio broadcasts, newspaper, travel for recreation, and entertainment. So essentially, all of these areas are linked to the bigger area, which is New York City. All right, other functional regions, shopping centers, which are centered on a mall or a supermarket. Okay, so again, if you're thinking about malls, this is a good example. So not only do you have the mall, you have all the shops that are around the mall, and they exist simply because the mall is there. The mall is attracting the people. And the Macaroni Grill and the Olive Garden, they're benefiting from all of those people that are going into the mall, driving the traffic there. Okay? All right, so let's form a look at functional regions. Look, these places are defined by a set of activities, connections, interactions. So, for example, we've got newspaper circulation areas, commuter traffic patterns, subway systems, and highway systems. So, I-10, 1960, these are all functional regions. Okay, so they function to get us from one place to another, focused around a central hub. All right, so think of it like a bike wheel, guys. So this is the center of all activity. Think of this as Houston. Think of these spokes as maybe the freeway systems, the subway systems, which we don't have here, but we have in other cities, the bus systems, the metro systems, and then areas receiving transportation, communication, and trade. So think of the outside areas, right? If you're in Beaumont and you're still receiving 94.5, the Buzz radio station, then you are still within the functional region of Houston. All right, New York City, again, a functional region. So you always have to ask yourself, why do all of these lines of transportation exist? Well, they exist to get people into New York City. That's why it is functional. The subways are functional to get people into the city. All right, so here's another one. This is the distribution area of the Mountain Views News. Again, that is functional. So they serve a particular area. And the central hub would be the area where the news is produced. All right, so these are radio broadcast areas. You can see here in Iowa, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 functional regions which broadcast to a particular area. So the functional region would actually be this colored area, and then the central hub, of course, would be the city that's broadcasting. All right, and last, we have perceptual region. So this is a construct that reflects human feelings and attitudes about areas and therefore are defined by people's shared subjective images of those areas. So it is based on your own particular thought process, not really based on attitudes. Okay, so think of prejudice. Think of how you are subjective based on your own personal feelings, and that's really what a perceptual region is. Okay, so tends to reflect the elements of people's mental map. So if you said, hey, look, the South is much bigger than that first map that I showed you of the regions of the United States, then your perception of the South is much larger than what it really is. Okay, so we impose a personal sense of order and structure, and we do that based on stereotypes. Now, those stereotypes may not be correct, but they are still there, and that's what we mean by perception. You perceive it to be a certain way. So, example, Southern California. Where is that? Does Southern California end in LA? Perhaps a little bit further north? It's tough to say. It depends on your own personal experience. Dixie is in the South, but how far in the South? How far does it go? Does it go all the way to Texas? That depends on your perception. So, they are thought of as being spatial units, although they do not have precise borders. This is key, guys. They do not have precise borders or even commonly accepted regional characteristics or names. So if I say, where is, Dixie, I might get 95 different answers to 100 questions. Okay, it's going to change based on your own perceptions. Make sure you get all of this down. And of course, pause the video if you need to. All right, so let's look at our own stereotypes and perceptions. So just think about, hey, what happened? What do you think of when you think of Southern California, the South, or Dixie, Iraq, New York City? So just quickly think about that. You can pause the video if you would like. And then we're going to take a look at a few of these. All right, so we're going to look here at Dixie or the South. If you look here, these are, again, the perceptions of people. So most people feel like this area would be Dixie. However, some people include Florida. Some people include Texas and Oklahoma. Other people include some of these northern states. So it really depends on your personal experience. It is perceptual. There is no definitive border. Next, perceptual region. So your map might have looked something closer to this for the South, or this for the West. So again, these are perceptual and they do vary. Notice they don't have any particular borders. They're kind of all over the place. They're not defined by state borders, city borders, or anything like that. So these are Google searches. These are perceptions of each state. So here in the United States, why is Texas so? Of course, the first thing that autocompletes is big. I think that probably makes sense. Here in New York, we have expensive. I would agree with that. Up here in the north, cold. Yep. Liberal. Yep. Expensive. Definitely agree with that for California. So just an interesting look at perceptions through Google. Next, so this man Percy decided, hey, look, we need to create these regions based on culture, and he broke it up into a bunch of different regions, and these would be the proposed 38 states. So we would actually be living in the Alamo region. And his thought process is, hey, look, we share a lot more in common down here than we do with people up here in the Panhandle. They share more in common with Oklahoma. And again, that's his own perception. All right, examples of perceptual regions based on politics. So here we have here the USA, and then here, of course, is the USSR. This was during the 1980s. We were obviously the two most important countries in the world, and all of these other countries, not so much. All right, so another perceptual region. So if you're a Texan, this is how we feel, supposedly. So it looks like we take about half the state. So again, just an interesting view on what perception can lead to. All right, not exactly perceptual, but does have those characteristics. So what does your state do well? We do a lot of wind production. That's good. We should feel pretty proud about that. Unfortunately, what do we not do well? Oh, high school graduation. Looks like that won't be a problem for us, though, right? Won't be a problem for us at early college. All right, so just some more perceptual maps that are kind of interesting to look at. Here we have baseball, countries of baseball. Here we're obviously Astros country. Again, these are perceptual. They don't have any true borders, and they can change. All right, population and land area. So again, if your country had the biggest population, you can see China would then be moved into Russia. India would be moved over here into Canada. We would still be third because we're the third largest in size and population. So just an interesting perceptual map there. Here are some fun maps that you can look at if you wanted to click on this or just type it into your URL. Otherwise, we are done, guys. So hopefully you learned a lot about regions today. Make sure you bring your notes for the quiz and bring your notes because we will be using them in class on Monday and Tuesday. Hope you guys have an excellent weekend.